All right, grasshoppers. We have a really interesting guest on today. Obviously, you can see his name there, Robert Jones. Robert, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
We're just getting to know each other. I got an old friend of mine, Brian Dorsey, out of Texas. I hadn't talked to him in a long time, and I just said, geez, I'm going to give him a call and see what he's up to. And very interesting, because this is a topic that I've been talking about for a while that I think is fascinating. Robert has a company, and I'm gonna make sure that I say it properly here. The Roots Food Group. And why we're really interested in is that they look at food as medicine. So I've talked for a while now, and use the pandemic or the virus here as an example, where, listen, I feel terrible because people have died in the economy and all that. But I think part of the reason we have such a hard time with these viruses is that so much of our population is out of shape, obesity, which leads to type 2 diabetes in particular, and heart disease and all those different kinds of things. And if we were in better shape and eat better, then we'd be able to fight off those viruses better. And that's what Robert does here. So their food group, they look at food as medicine. How did you get started in this whole thing, Robert?
Yeah, so my background is farming. My family had farms growing up, and I studied agricultural business at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and went straight into farming. But really, food is medicine. The light bulb went off with an exclusive licensing agreement we signed with the American Diabetes Association, and it really turned me on to the concept of food as medicine, and that there was clinical results, published studies that show that you can put chronic disease into remission by eating the right foods, right? It's both ends of the spectrum. Bad food got you into the chronic condition, and good food will get you out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. Since we talked the other day, I've gone on YouTube and watched a few videos. And there's a doctor, I think it's Dr. Chang out of Toronto, and I'm really big on the intermittent fasting. And we talked about this before we went on, and he does a lot of videos on it too. And I happened to see a video that he talked about with diabetes, where the medicines that they're giving the patients now with diabetes to help control the diabetes ultimately makes it worse, because they add more weight on, they get heavier, and now the diabetes gets worse. So interesting seeing that. But
and you have all the side effects of pharmaceutical drugs, right? The disclaimers at the bottom of every screen on a commercial, and there are no side effects other than good side effects with food itself. You sleep better. Your mind is healthier, your body is healthier, you're more productive at work, right? You're a better functioning human.
So, you know what's interesting too, obviously, so the idea is now that you guys will send out healthy meals to patients to help them lose weight, get in better shape. And again, that's just part of the equation, right? That doesn't solve all the issues. There still has to be exercise. Again, I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I think that helps in a lot of ways. Talk to me from the business side. So instead of going out and trying to advertise like all these other food prep companies have, you've gone to the insurance companies, correct?
Yes, sir. So what I identified was, instead of going after healthy people, which typically already get it, right? We're going after the unhealthy population. And unfortunately for our world, that's a larger percentage than the healthy side. So going back to your comments about COVID, you know, if you look at the different layers of age and chronic disease, so on average, 65 and above in age, well, 60% of the world population will have one chronic disease, 40% will have two. 80% of the people who died because of COVID were in that age bracket, and the complications were because they were unhealthy to start. Exactly to your point, your compromised immunity because you have these chronic diseases is really affecting your ability to fight off any viruses.
Right.
And it's staggering that we're in a pandemic today, but the epidemic that lives and was prior to COVID is chronic disease in general. Right. And 90%, this is an unbelievable statistic, 90% of all healthcare dollars spent which annual healthcare spend is $4 trillion a year in the US.
Wow.
$3.6 trillion of the 4 trillion goes to fight chronic diseases and the complications thereof.
Wow.
I mean, it's truly an epidemic. New Zealand came out 2-3 weeks ago, the country, and said type 2 diabetes was likely going to bankrupt the entire healthcare system of New Zealand.
Wow. That's amazing. And I should look this up. Do you know, so I'm a big, this really gets me going. So we don't allow cigarette commercials any longer on TV because they determined that's going to lead to all these other diseases and everything, lung diseases, heart attacks, all that stuff. But we still allow commercials on TV for all these unhealthy foods. I'd like to, do you know the numbers off the top of your head? How many people, how would I ask this? How many people suffer from diseases caused by cigarette smoking as opposed to type 2 diabetes? Is it roughly the same in that same category, you think?
Yeah, it's roughly in the same category. And, you know, I'll explain it if we'll go down this rabbit hole for a second. The reason food looks the way it has for the last 50 years is because we were trying to transport food over mass geography and distances, right? Well, to do that, the only thing you're really trying to, by processing the food, what you're really trying to solve for is perishability, right? So you process it, you put additives and all these other parts of the food that aren't real food, right? Processed food, and that's what we've been eating for the last 50 years. And that's what's contributed to these massive percentages that are just so out of whack.
Yeah.
So today, you know, if you're sending a truck across the country, and I have retail food products, you know, sometimes it takes 3 weeks before you manufacture it, before it actually hits the store shelf. Then it has to sit on the store shelf and sell again, right? And then the consumer puts it in the refrigerator and they have to consume it. So you're talking about a long period of time.
Right.
What's really happened, I call the second coming of the railroad. The first railroad was we could transport goods over long distances economically, right? That's what the first railroad did, and expanded manufacturing on a national basis. What I call the second coming of the railroad are companies like FedEx. And those railroad tracks lead to someone's front door. That didn't really exist before at scale. So now I can make fresh, healthy, unprocessed food and deliver it directly to the consumer in 1 or 2 days, which you've bypassed all the legacy distribution lanes, distributors and hands that are touching that food product all through the chain. And you're going from manufacturer right to the consumer. But what it allows you to do is make a food product that doesn't have all these additives and preservatives and processing that is really the culprit of what's really happened to our society and chronic disease in general.
All the bad fats and all the sugars and salts and all those things. Yeah. All right. So Roots Food Group then has gone to the health insurance companies, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think I got the numbers right from you the other day. Currently, the insurance companies spend about $250,000 a year to help get medication to type 2 diabetes patients. Is that accurate?
So in certain cohorts, let's call them, you know, high risk, very high risk, right? There's different cohorts of a type 2 diabetic. And in the highest form, where your A1Cs are severely elevated, you're exactly right. It is a mammoth amount of money and cost of care of medication, as well as procedures, medical expenses that go into that number. And obviously, not obviously, but the food is cheaper than the medicine. The interesting thing about food versus medicine is the insulin is like a security blanket, right? You're just managing your blood sugar levels.
Yeah.
Instead, food actually makes you healthy.
Yeah.
Right? It changes the molecular chemistry of your body. Bodies are resilient and it happens very quickly, right? And you can actually change it in such a way where you're no longer considered a type 2 diabetic because you're eating the right food.
Right. Okay. So now, so it costs that money for the insurance company. Now you've come along to the insurance companies and say, hey, listen, we need to stop, just like you said, just treating the diabetics. We need to get them to not be diabetics anymore. How do we do that? We do that by sending them good food. So the insurance company will pay for this food to be shipped to diabetics. Correct? Is that accurate so far?
Yes, sir. So we're at the infancy stages of this kind of secular shift, and it goes with healthcare as well. So healthcare the system was based upon fee for services. Basically, you broke your leg and they'd fix your leg after you broke it, right? It was after something happened. You had a heart attack, you have open heart surgery. They didn't put dollars in front of the problem, and that's the secular shift that's going on. Value-based care, which changes the financial equation from fee for services. So you're incentivizing and paying doctors for getting people healthy, not just fixing them when they're broken. So that is shifting. And by the way, has to shift because we all know health insurance is very expensive. The interesting thing about health insurance, Tom, is if I go get in a car accident, my auto insurance by itself is going to go up because I got in a car accident. If you have open heart surgery, all of our insurance goes up, right? It's universal and amortized across the universe of either a company, a family, an employer, and the government. So when you amortize it and everyone else is paying for everyone else's, bad efforts and being healthy, your insurance is costly because of it. And it affects all the way down the chain from the government to employers, to employees, to the families. It really is it's a financial burden today.
Right. It sounds kind of harsh to say this, but like my fitness is so important to me, but it really doesn't matter. Like the cost, the financial part of it, because a lot of other people around the world are not health conscious. Yep. It ends up costing everybody, including us, more money. And it's a harsh way to put that. It's somebody's health. So I'm not trying to boil it all down to dollars and cents, but yeah.
Well, think about, here's the prescription for a diabetic. Let's just use type 2 diabetes. Here's all your pharmaceutical drugs, right, that the doctor's going to prescribe to you, and you're going to go to the pharmacy and fulfill them. And then there's two other parts. Go have activity in your life and go eat healthy. So basically what they're doing is they're saying, I'm now going to prescribe the nutrition part of this equation. It's always been part of the formula, but now I'm going to prescribe it because of the ROI, the financial ROI, and the health and wellness ROI that comes from it.
Right. You wonder, so a big part of this is going to have to be education too. Like I know for me during the pandemic, I hate to say it just because people lost their lives, but for me, it's been great because I've had more time to really study about my body, about the science of food and everything. So I realize now where I was 2 years ago is not where I am today, as far as my knowledge of how to eat, how to exercise better. So that's going to be a big portion of it too, right? Like people say, okay, we're going to send you these healthy meals. I believe is 10 meals a week the plan is?
Yeah, so most of the studies have centered around a minimum of 10 meals per week where they see these quantifiable benefits and reductions in blood pressure and cholesterol and A1Cs. And you're exactly right. Education is a huge part of this. So we are the food side of the equation, right? And then that's in conjunction with clinical care. So that's dietitians, nutritionists, certified diabetes educators, your doctor, your nurse, that are guiding you through this process because it's education and it's ultimately the behavioral change that we're all seeking individually and collectively, that you don't go back to, the 44-ounce triple big gulp that doesn't serve anyone.
Right. Yeah. It's not once for me, I'm starting to realize, okay, what bad foods do to me. You look at the bad food now, you I don't want to put that in my body. If you're not educated about what it's doing to your body, you don't know that. So you say, well, it tastes good, so I'm going to eat it. Right. So that's, and I guess I mean, that to me, that's just I love this topic because I think it could just change our world so much in so many ways. The financial portion of the health, how long we live. Now, some people that are not going to be too happy is pharmaceutical companies, correct? They're not going to like you very much.
Yeah, it's interesting because doctors take an oath, which is the Hippocratic Oath, which includes let food be thy medicine, right? I mean, that is in the original oath. And if we're all striving, no matter what the financial repercussions are or otherwise, that you're trying to heal somebody, then you're following your mission and what you're trying to do good for the company or for your patient and for your profession. Obviously, it has, pharmaceutical companies have their foot on the neck. I mean, there's a chokehold on that.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's almost, I hate to say it like this, but you watch TV at night, and I try not to too much, but it's like it's a made for TV so that they can advertise all the medications they want to sell. That's almost why TV is there now. It seems like every commercial is about some new medicine. It's almost like they're creating diseases for the new medicines they've got. So it's good. They're going to have to make a shift, right? I mean, because it's dollars and cents too. These are big companies. They're publicly owned companies. They're going to have to say, well, listen, okay, if we're not, and it's not going to happen overnight, but if we're not going to sell as many medications, let's take another stance. So we want to help people be healthy. So maybe it's that education portion of it that they get involved in to say, okay, that's our thing now. We still want to make our money because it's a corporation. That's fine. That's why corporations are there. But they're not going to just go away and say, we're not going to give up these billions of dollars or trillions of dollars that we're making. So we have to find another way to do it. And yeah, the education portion, to me, that's a logical choice, I think. But
no, absolutely. And we're at a critical point when a country like New Zealand, this is a first world country, right, who's saying the entire healthcare system is going to be bankrupt because the cost of care is so much money now. Something has to give. And when the pharmaceutical drugs don't make you better, they're just managing your condition, you're not making those strides that you need to make.
Definitely. So your company, Roots Food Group, then, are you targeting just patients with type 2 diabetes, or is it anybody with a weight issue?
Yeah, so chronic disease in general is what we're focusing on today. But we have some athletes and celebrities that are part of our company, and one is specifically in mental health, and has a interest in mental health because he also suffers from anxiety and various things. And there's a lot of studies now on food and mental health. And it makes sense of, again, obviously athletes get this the most, right? Because you can't put 87 octane in the Ferrari and make it run right? It's got to be racing fuel. So the same goes for fuel in the body, right? If you're not actually putting the right things in your body as an athlete, you're not going to perform at the highest level.
Totally true.
And you and I were just talking about that, drinking a Coke versus drinking a water, you can, I was talking to a professional tennis player, and their sisters, if I won't mention their names, but, she would say if she just, she had a sweet tooth, and if she had a couple squares of a Hershey's, she could literally feel it the next day.
Yeah.
But her body was so highly tuned that just having those little amounts of things really affected her.
Right.
And, those are the Ferraris of the world. You can't put the wrong, the gas in the gas tank.
It's a tough battle, right? Because there's so much working against us, what we're trying to do, get people healthy. You see all the advertisements on TV. We're kind of conditioned now to look at food the wrong way from what I see. we're looking at food as a source of pleasure and comfort and entertainment, going to restaurants. And listen, it's great to have healthy food and taste good and all that, but food is really there for nourishment, really. You can still have it taste good. You can still enjoy yourself in a restaurant, but just look at food differently. But that's the real challenge here, right? To get everybody to look at food differently and look at it as to fuel that Ferrari the proper way, right?
Yeah, and going back to education. So I was talking to a NBA player the other day, and he grew up in south side of town. Did not come from any sort of money, single mother, so on and so forth. And he said, Rob, I didn't know what cauliflower was. I thought it was a flower because it wasn't part of our diet, right? And education is part of that as well. I stood up at the National Wellness Institute. I was on a panel. And these are all people at a conference. And it was on food is medicine, this panel. And I asked the crowd of about 500, I said, how many people cook with rutabaga? One hand went up out of 500. And I said, okay, next question. How many people even know what a rutabaga looks like?
It's a good one. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. 5 hands went up.
Right.
But you're talking about education and really introducing ingredients and recipes, not from a box, right? In their pure form. And thus the name of our company, Roots Food Group, is really going back to the roots of healthy, unprocessed food, because that's where health and wellness really comes from.
Right. It's interesting. I was thinking about what you said earlier there too. You see these food companies now that have the prepared foods that they send to people, but in most cases they're targeting already healthy people. So Roots is going to the insurance company to say, okay, we're going to supply you with the food. So the insurance company then, how are they deciding? Is it everybody that they view? Obviously, they want people to be healthier because it's going to save them money, right? So they want for instance, type 2 diabetics, they want them to not be type 2 diabetics any longer. So it behooves them to get this food out to as many people as possible, correct?
Yes and no. So that's the conundrum in the difference between fee for services and value-based care and preventative care. The doctor does not get paid, and there's no reimbursement through the insurance, right? Insurance is an intermediary to the federal government for all intents and purposes, right?
Yeah.
And they're processing claims, right? But it's an earmark or it's an allocation of Medicare or Medicaid, depending on what your plan you're on. Well, if there are no dollars flowing through,
right,
there's no one prescribing anything. So what's shifting now is the way they're looking at healthcare and how they're compensating doctors differently. And in addition to that, there are groups out there that are private insurance, right? Self-insured companies.
Right.
So basically anyone over, plus or minus 500 employees, it financially makes sense to be self-insured. Right. You don't have an insurance company in between whatsoever.
Right.
The CFO is writing the check for an open heart surgery, right? You're self-insured. You're paying for every medical expense.
Right.
So we're working on some value-based programs with self-insured companies as well, and that community, because they literally have the financial risk for the employees.
So it would make sense that self-insured company wants them to be healthy as well, too, right? So if I've got a big office building, I've got 500 employees, I'm going to want healthy food in there. I want gyms in there. I want time for my employees to get into the gyms to exercise, right? It makes sense to be, like you talked about the mental health issue as well. Now they'll be better employees too, right?
So I'll give you an example. And I was a little, I wish they had more success. So there was a group that just got disbanded about 6 months ago. It was called Haven Healthcare. Haven Healthcare was a 3-way joint venture between Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon.
Robert, I'm just going to close my window. Keep going.
Yep. Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, and JP Morgan. So some of the largest companies around and all the portfolio companies that they own, right? So you're talking millions and millions of employees. So there was a three-way joint venture called Haven Healthcare to address the cost of healthcare for those three companies. Now, Haven did a lot of good work, but it was difficult to get the three companies to implement everything universally. So they disbanded the joint venture, but JP Morgan literally just came out last week and said, based on all the learnings that they took from the Haven Healthcare joint venture, they're now just put together, the gentleman's name is Dan Mendelsohn. He is leading up the JP Morgan unit now for healthcare. They put a $250 million fund next to him to invest in products and things that will reduce the cost of healthcare for JP Morgan. JP Morgan has 170,000 employees, right? Their insurance bill for employees and families is $1.3 billion a year.
Wow.
10% savings is $130 million, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's real money. And when you look at these large organizations, auto manufacturers, tech companies like Google, Amazon, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of employees. I mean, I want to say Google serves like 150 or 250,000 meals a week because it's part of their corporate package where they serve food to their employees. I mean, there's big numbers in those big organizations and the cost of healthcare and the benefits that you can draw from programs like this.
It's interesting, right, that everybody isn't doing it. It just seems like such a simple process. So all the money, there's the health side of it, but the money they would save as well from the businesses. It's just
productivity, days off, medical expenses, right? All of those things, procedures and physical therapy and rehab and all those things that go into it. It's amazing to me that it hasn't been implemented sooner.
Yeah. I hate to say it. This is awful because I have friends that are doctors too. And I don't want to try to label all doctors as being the same thing, but you touched on it, right? They benefit from people being sick. They don't benefit from people being healthy. And that's terrible to say that. And I'm not trying to say that doctors want people sick, but they're in the business for that too. So that's going to be the struggle, right? So the pharmaceutical companies, they're not going to like this. The doctors aren't going to necessarily like it. The insurance companies will like it. So there's some struggles there, right? I mean, listen, I love this. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that's way overdue and needed, but there's going to be a lot of people fighting it too, right?
And it's a global problem. And I mean, you look at other programs that are age-based, Social Security, right? Social Security was based upon a program when your effective average lifespan was considerably less, right? Well, when you live longer than Social Security actually allows for, there's a gap.
Right.
So, it's interesting when you overlay some of these social programs that were instituted years ago, and now you bring in new technologies and new healthcare and procedures and vaccines and all these things, and people live longer. Well, these other programs aren't aligned anymore, which is its own problem. Interesting and very complex, to say the least. But there's just a massive financial benefit. There's a massive health and wellness benefit. And I think we could all use a good dose of that, based upon the last 14 months on top of it.
Yeah. So you're getting started with Roots Food Group. Well, you've been at it for a while, but it's now just starting to take hold. So again, Roots Food Group, Robert Jones, what he does is he's got healthy food. They'll ship it to the patients. The insurance companies will pay for the food. It's 10 meals a week. It's not the total answer on how to not be a diabetic any longer, but it is part of the process. The exercise is still very important, education, so you know what else to eat. I think it's fantastic. We've talked about it for a while. To me, it's kind of ironic that I've talked about it so much, and I just happened to pick up the phone. And our good friend Brian Dorsey, who put us together, is in the middle of this project with you because it's something that's really near and dear to my heart too. So I think it's a fantastic deal. We'll be doing some more shows about this topic and updates down the road, Robert and I, about where we're at with the company and how it's going. But I think it's brilliant. There are some people that are going to fight it. Where people are going to have to take a shift in how they look at foods and medicine and everything. And food is medicine and how to eat properly. So great to have you on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Tom. Have a good day.